This is Insight the year ahead. In the wake of Brexit and Donald Trump's victory, all eyes will be on France next year. On April the 23rd, the first round of the French presidential election takes place. The country has been struggling to cope with an influx of migrants from Africa and the Middle East and has suffered several terrorist attacks at the hands of Islamist extremists. Those on the right are now vowing to crack down on immigration and radical Islam. So let's give you a look at who the candidates are. François Fillon, the Conservative former Prime Minister, is the French Republican Party candidate. On the far right, Marine Le Pen will stand. She's hoping the same anti-establishment sentiments behind Brexit and Donald Trump's election could sweep her to power. On the left is Emmanuel Macron, a former economy minister who's running as an independent candidate. Further left is the Communist Party's candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And Yannick Jadot will run for the Greens. And with me today, Afzal Ashraf, who's visiting fellow at the University of Nottingham, and the veteran foreign correspondent and author, Jonathan Steele. Jonathan, which way do you think France will go? To the right, to the centre? Probably not the left this time round.
Well, it's very hard to tell because François Fillon, who seems to be the most strong candidate on the centre-right, is making a big thing of the economic reform, as he calls it, economic change, economic upheaval, if you like, because he wants to get rid of the 35-hour week, which was one of the socialists' big achievements. He wants to cut government bureaucracy by about 100,000 jobs. And so, in a way, by making the issue economic, it somehow helps the left a bit, because the left is obviously much stronger on that issue, and there's a bigger potential ideological divide. So I think in a funny way, it'll be easier for the left to fight against Fillon than if Alain Juppé, the other right-wing candidate in the Republican Party, had won the primary elections in November.
And just making people feel safe, security, terrorism and all those issues, do you think that will feature largely in their election too?
It will hugely. And it's not just security aspects, but the immigration and asylum seeker aspects, which is also cultural and social. And of course, France hasn't had an integrated community. There's a lot of ghettos with North African immigrants mainly. So I think that is something that Marine Le Pen, her father, and there's an informal network now of right-wing extremists who are taking strength from each other, sharing ideas, sharing narratives that work. So I think we will definitely see a very significant swing to the right. And I think that Marine Le Pen could surprise the public and the world.
France, not one nation, of course, Jonathan. As you know, looking back at the American example, it was pockets where crucial votes were lost, weren't they? And arguably the political strategists, certainly in the Clinton campaign, got that wrong. How do you think France will divide? The cities have got these inner city problems, as many Western nations do. Does that give an opportunity to the right, do you think?
Well, the other thing that's often not discussed properly in the French context is the division between Protestants and Catholics, which is actually very strong in France. François Fillon is a very traditional social conservative. You know, he's very dubious about abortion. He says he's totally against same-sex marriage. So all the sort of social libertarian issues that have come to the fore in most Western societies in the last 20 or 30 years might be reversed if Fillon wins, and certainly if Marine Le Pen wins. Although, in a funny way, she's actually less conservative on some of those issues than he is. She has been more willing to, perhaps as a woman, being willing to accept abortion as a legitimate right of a woman.
But bucking the trend, the narrative tends to be Brexit was a surprise, Trump was a surprise. No doubt Marine Le Pen supporters are going to say, and here's the surprise for France. Does that necessarily hold water in this case, do you think?
I think it does. I think there is a global trend. If you look at the election of a prime minister in the Philippines who is anti the Pope in one of the most Catholic countries, we see what's happened with the Labour Party leader who has come from nowhere. There is a dislocation in the political classes from the public. Politics has become institutionalized and it's out of touch with reality. I think that there is a populism that the current political classes have started, which is being exploited by the really populist leaders. The principles underlying politics have been eclipsed by populism, and that strengthens extremists.
And the role of social media, I think, is terribly important. I mean, we've seen that, of course, in the American election. In France, too, I mean, some people on social media were saying Alain Juppé was Ali Juppé, trying to use this sort of Islamophobic sort of argument in the most terrible way.
Well, let's take our look at the world a little bit further east to the Middle East next. Two cities which haven't left the news headlines during 2016 have been the northern Syrian city of Aleppo and 600 kilometers to the east, the Iraqi city of Mosul, which up until a few months ago was a Daesh stronghold. As the war raged in Aleppo and Mosul, they were deemed to be among the most dangerous places on earth. Their fate will surely shape the future geopolitical landscape, not just for Syria and Iraq, but perhaps the whole region. Jonathan, I wonder if we're witnessing here the beginning of a redrawing of maps, territories that just do not recognize official country boundaries anymore.
Well, we already have that in the north of Syria, where the Kurds have created a semi-autonomous enclave, which they call Rojava, and that's hardly likely to be reversed unless the Turkish army makes a major incursion, bigger than it's done so far. And then you've got the whole ISIS issue, Daesh issue. It could be that even though they lose in Mosul and lose part of Raqqa, they will still be a force to be reckoned with in reverting to a kind of guerrilla counterinsurgency rather than trying to hold territory. And then you've got the potential split in the northwest with the Alawite areas breaking away if the opposition were ever to look like taking power in Damascus, which of course doesn't actually look very likely at the moment because they seem to be losing strength in and around Aleppo.
And do you think, I mean, one of the great divides, I suppose, across the Middle East is Sunni and Shia Muslim, and the fact that one or the other wants to see to dominate territory. It would seem a retrograde step if countries and territories divide on those lines. But do you think that's a possibility now?
It's being exploited. I mean, Sunni and Shia Muslims have lived together without a great deal of problem for centuries. But it's something that has come about in a very short space of time in the last 3 or 4 years. It's shocked me when I go into the Middle East how much sectarianism has come into politics when it didn't exist to a large extent. And the reason for that isn't Sunni and Shia. It is because the two regional powers, Saudi Arabia and Iran, have political differences which are in the interest of other regional powers who are neither Sunni nor Shia or Muslim, who benefit from this divide. And they're being drawn into a conflict along those identity lines. And sectarianism has grown very rapidly in only a very short space of time. However, I don't think that politics can be sustained on that basis. If you know anything about Islamic theology and Islamic politics, it won't sustain itself on sectarian basis.
And the catalyst for so much trouble in the Middle East used to be thought the Palestinian-Israeli question. Jonathan, it seems to have gone off the headlines away in 2016. Do you think any kind of either further development on that front or resolution on that front is needed in 2017?
Well, it would be, because, of course, 2017 is the 50th anniversary of the seizure of the West Bank and East Jerusalem by the Israeli army in 1967. So that is really a key date symbolically. But in fact, I don't think there's anything will change. Trump is not very focused on the Middle East. He's more pro-Israeli government than Obama was. He's talked about moving the capital to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. I don't know whether he'll actually do that. I mean, moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But I don't think it's going to be a big issue for the Trump presidency.
Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed. Now we end, as always, with our Insight Bite, something that we feel you ought to know. And as we look ahead to 2017, there really is only one thing the world wants to know. What will Donald Trump do in office? On January the 20th, he'll become the 45th President of the United States. He won't be the first celebrity to move into the Oval Office, and he certainly won't be the first rich white man to be Commander-in-Chief. He will achieve one first, being the first president to be 70 years old when they're sworn in, the oldest president in the history of the United States. But everything else, well, no one knows, except perhaps the president-elect. The man who's lived his life as a member of the financial elite has been elected on a wave of popular anti-elitism. And it's not just Americans who are waiting to see what that means. From trade to climate change to war and peace, his decisions are no longer just who's been hired or fired. They will affect billions of people around the world. 2017 could be an interesting year. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.